Okay, so welcome everybody to our event on fossil-free Sweden. We start with the Swedish tradition on time. I'll just say a quick sentence in Hebrew about the translation. אז האירוע מתורגם בתרגום סימולטני. מי שרוצה להאזין לו בעברית, יש לכם כפתור מצד ימין למטה, עם ציור של כדור הארץ, interpretation, תבחרו שם בהיברו, תוכלו לשמוע את האירוע. So the event is translated to Hebrew. If you want to hear the Hebrew, you can press the interpretation and click on the Hebrew button. So this event is part of a series of webinars organized by our colleagues from Ullenhag, the movement for Israeli urbanism, together with the Heschel Center, Porter School of Environmental Studies, and Life and Environment. And this is the second event that coincides with a series of 6 events by Ullenhag. My name is Avi Blau. I'm the director of the Institute for Circular Engineering and Economy, and I'll moderate this event, which is packed with content and with excellent speakers, both from Sweden and from Israel. And we are really tight on schedule, so let's just jump into the water. And I want to invite Mr. Erik Ullenhag, the ambassador of Sweden to Israel, to greet and to give the welcoming words. Ambassador, the floor is yours, and you need to unmute if you're muted.
Shalom, thank you for introducing me. Sorry for continuing in English. God eftermiddag to the Swedish audience. I'm the Swedish ambassador to Israel since September last year. Before that, I spent 4 years in Jordan. My saddest day in Jordan, I think, was a day when we, in the afternoon, got the news that the school class that went on a picnic in the morning didn't exist anymore. 21 kids died. Being a parent myself, it's very hard to fully grasp. Preparing the picnic in the morning, getting the phone call from the police or in the school in the afternoon that your kid is dead. We don't know for sure that these flash floods were created by the climate change, but probably they were. The flash floods here we have had in Israel as well. We see an environment that's actually is deeply affected by probably the greatest challenge we have as humanity, the climate crisis. All of us know that no country could solve the climate change and the climate crisis by ourselves. We could have the best legislation in Sweden or in Israel. It doesn't really matter if we don't do this together. But all of us needs to do something. Or in this case, must do something. Because if we should have any possibility to reach the goal of saving the climate, we need to act now. We should have acted yesterday. Sweden is a rich country. We have great natural resources with the water. We have fossil-free energy. But we're also trying to be a world leader when it comes to fighting the climate change and finding ways of lowering the carbon emissions. I should say that we're not just trying to be world leading, we are actually quite world leading. One of the things that we're focusing on now is trying to become fossil free to the year 2045. I here also see a great opportunity of cooperation between Israel and Sweden. To be honest, I've been a little bit surprised since I came to Israel that the climate change is not higher on the agenda than it has been last couple of years. This is a region that will be deeply affected, more affected than Sweden. We have the means to prepare ourselves. We won't have 3-4 degrees on rising temperatures as you will have in the Middle East. So I've been a little bit surprised that you, in the last 4 elections, didn't dominated by the climate change debate. But it's gradually changing. And I meet a lot of people in Israel trying to do something. And here we have an area for more cooperation between Sweden and Israel. We need to cooperate, meet the challenge together, but also maybe compete. If we try to be fossil-free 2045, hopefully you will try to meet that challenge. And we need to inspire each other and find the smart minds in Israel, the smart minds in Sweden to actually make a difference. I'm super happy to be part of hosting this seminar. I think we're gonna hopefully be a little bit smarter after a discussion for some time this afternoon. Especially proud I am that we also have with us Åsa Romson, the former Vice Prime Minister in Sweden and the former Minister for Climate and Environment. And actually, more as a citizen, I would like to personally thank Åsa for what you did for making Sweden actually in the forefront of fighting climate change. I open on a very tragic note, the effects of the climate change with the flash floods in Jordan. But this is also an area with a lot of opportunities where we can see the new jobs coming. And if we are successful of replacing the fossil, we could actually, Sweden and hopefully Israel, could be world leaders in this together. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a nice afternoon. I don't think it's Erev Tov yet, but for tonight, Erev Tov. אני תלמיד לעברית, but my Hebrew is very bad for the moment. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ambassador Ullenhag, and for the Hebrew. That's a great segue to actually get starting on really getting to know Swedish policy for being fossil-free or for being climate neutral, and who best to describe that than Åsa Romson, that the ambassador introduced so beautifully. Åsa is currently at the IVL, which is the Swedish Environmental Research Institute, but she has led the Swedish Climate Act and work on climate neutrality. And thank you, Åsa, for being with us in this event, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me, and especially thanks to you, Erik, for the kind words, and also a big thanks for addressing this conference initially with very strong pictures of what is actually what's at stake when it comes to climate change issues. It's I think super important that as many as possible really know what we are talking about when it comes to climate issues. Is my microphone okay? It's good, yeah. And you see the pictures in the screen? It's just supposed to. I was supposed to talk a bit also on how has Sweden then got to be a nation which really tries to tackle the climate emissions and see the importance of cooperating worldwide in this business, and not just addressing the horrible fact that this climate change is something that is going to affect future generation. It's already affecting current societies, and it's affecting globally, and for the most vulnerable the most. But we also want to focus here on what is positive side. What could we actually? How could we join forces with those that might not want to act just on the facts of a coming disaster, but also want to act on the facts of coming opportunities in the change of and transition of the society. So I will speak rapidly on Sweden's fossil-free policies, and also try to be something that what do we want to reach out for other states and other minds, and how things could be set together. So something about how Sweden had come a nation that is trying to take a world lead action on climate change. Well, first of all, we have put high ambitions on the paper, and not only on paper, we now try to work on them, but having the target set has shown in many countries to be very important to gather the forces and the actors. And that's also the principle of the Paris Agreement. And I will come back to Paris, because I think that was a paradigm shift. And as Erik Ullenhag mentioned, I was then in charge of the climate ministerial of climate and environment here in Sweden, and participated in the conference. But trying to see how the target set is something that is, it's just a tool, but it's a very important tool, because that tool can lead us together in a collective action, so to speak. And the Swedish targets have been set that net zero emissions by 2045, at least 85% in domestic territorial emissions. And that is, I mean, there are problems in how to measure climate emissions, but there is one global standard and language, and that is the domestic territorial emissions. And therefore, that has been important to set those figures in those and calculations in those figures. That is also the reporting to the United Nations and the Paris Agreement. But we have also set reductions in forefront of that, because having we know from the past that in environmental policies that has been a lot of targets set, long visions in the future, and that still not gets the society to work on those issues strong enough to get things moving. So it's very important to set the targets also how to get there. And one such important target from Sweden is 70% reduction of the domestic transports, and that's because 1/3 of the domestic emissions in Sweden are from transport. So the transport sector has been really important to try to find ways to start, but also setting that in a mindset, in a policy that continue to develop the welfare state. And that has been important in Sweden because, of course, we want to have this as a coherent policies that is actually reaching out for the whole society, not only targeting the narrow environmental policy. Up to the conference in Paris in 2015, the government set a goal that we actually wanted to challenge internationally, because of course we saw that this is truly an international important actions, and to challenge each other, try to set better goals, better targets, and better actions in place. That would be the way forward. So Sweden challenged other countries in Paris, and we said that we wanted to be the first fossil-free welfare nation. And some of the figures that we had to back that was, of course, that we had a development in Sweden where we had already before Paris Agreement being able to decrease the domestic emissions. But that was only still a first step. That was a step to have a change, but to put it into the development also of the welfare state, we thought that this is important to get the whole picture. I will contradict this one with saying and being honest that the Swedish emissions overseas, because this is of course how you report the emissions, as I mentioned, is actually today greater than the territorial climate emissions. So parallel to assessing the emissions in the traditional reporting system, as we have in the UN system with domestic territorial emissions, we also in parallel now assess the climate footprints of Swedes, and therefore the Swedish responsibility, so to speak. And then we can see that the climate footprints of Swedes is 8 tons per year, and that is way too much. So we just see this shows that Sweden has a lot to work on. But being transparent in figures is also, I think, an important tool in both having trust in global cooperation, but also to share what you shouldn't just share what's going good in your policies. You should also share, and I think policymakers more should share when it doesn't work as they want, or there were things that going bad. This is not, I mean, this is bad, but it's not unworkable. So this is what it's important and what drives Sweden to work more on climate issues. So trying to narrow down them, what is the emissions that we're talking about? How could the society work on them? Well, there are several areas, but as I said, for Swedish side, transport is an important area. And there is important tools and innovations, not the least, to find ways to reduce the emissions. The mobility sector, for example, to get electricity on board, to get a much better mobility, accessibility, even without own cars. And since Sweden is a huge country with quite long distance, this is of course one of the problems. But also looking at the waste side, and not the least of energy, how to produce the energy. So this is all areas where, coming from a very traditional way of doing things with high emissions, we can see society changing and transformation in each sector, which actually now goes much faster than we thought just a few years back. So every time we assess the policies from some years behind, we can see that even though there are still much struggles how to find good technology shifts and having the speed being enough, we can see it goes faster than before. And innovation is the tool of this. I think I want to share one picture from my years as a minister, and that was with the Paris Agreement and why it became such a game changer in the climate politics. This was, of course, not only because the French that was with Fabien Laron was sharing and having a very good diplomatic conference. It was because it was also good timing. It was in the time where a lot of actors in the innovation circle saw that there were more opportunities going the fossil-free way than going the reverse. But not the least, this would not have happened, I think, if it wasn't possible also for the world leaders to join in a window of opportunity just some days before Donald Trump went into office, and there were backlash on several other countries as well. But still, this was a window of opportunity where the world leaders could join, and they could see that they had the international regulation already from the Rio conference in the UN to build on, and it was ready to take a global shift on this. All countries taking their responsibility, but of course acknowledging that we all have differences in capabilities. Sweden has a long history in supporting multilateral environment agreements. We had the first UN conference on environment that was next year, it will be 50 years ago. But we also have a lot of cities that were front runners, and before even acted more actively than the national state. They were already in the networking of European and global big and small cities where the mayors had fronted the climate issues, not only with the climate emissions, but that it's because it was so connected to the air pollution and health of the citizens. So we have cities that were front runners. Both in Sweden and globally, the industry was much more on board on this issue. And as I said, a lot of them saw the innovation tool as much more interesting in the possibilities than going the reverse. So there was a push from business to actually make an agreement globally to be strong, has a strong message from the politics that we were going to going the fossil-free way, going to reduce and finally get rid of fossil emissions. But it was also, of course, engaged citizens and scientists, and I think maybe some of you remember that there was huge backing from all these groups during the conference. And I think that was kind of what make the agreement possible to give the signal that actually made, and I just put it up from, because I had the time to get it down from the CNN network, the media network that was flashing out on the Twitter this night when the agreement was made, that this is the end of fossil fuel. And that's quite a strong, I mean, as a media message, not just as a opinion from some individual politicians or NGO or whatever. This was what kind of the media report that. What did it mean, this agreement? Well, it actually meant that this will be, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the next year, but it will at some point be the end of the fossil fuel. And that means that all minds need now to think about how that society look like and what is the opportunities in such a society. And that is a game changer. Last picture, something about the Swedish climate policy. Yeah.
Just to timekeeping, we have 1 minute.
That's right. That's right. There was just one. So this is what Sweden was making then after this Paris Agreement. We made a quite strong climate policy framework, and with those tools, that broad agreements, also coming down to the national politics, not just leaving it as a global goal for the Paris, but doing your work, doing it at home, at local and regional and national level. That is what makes it also possible for the national innovators to feel secure that the state has chosen to go fossil free. That means the opportunities are open for them when they come with the solutions. I think that is the key. And thank you very much for having the conference and inviting me as well. I'm sorry, I don't know anything in Hebrew, so I shouldn't try, at least the little I know.
Yet. Thanks so much for the time. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Really, really interesting presentation. And you did mention cities as front runners in the climate battle, and that's a good segue to go to Stockholm and to invite Örjan Lundgren. He's the policy analyst for energy and climate at the city of Stockholm to share with us how does the city translate that policy into city level acts. Örjan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And it's an honor for me to be a speaker at this event. I'm Örjan Lundgren, and I'm working at the Environmental and Health Administration of the City of Stockholm. And I will try to describe a little bit the work that we are doing here in Stockholm. Next picture, please. In Stockholm, we have two overall climate goals decided by the politicians. The city, which means the geographical city, which with all activities that take place in Stockholm, shall be fossil-free by 2040. And for the city organization, with the city's administration and the companies that the city owns, shall be fossil-free by 2030. And in addition, there is a short-term goal that the city's climate impact will be at most 1.5 CO2 by capita by the end of 2023. Next. The goals are written in the every year's budget. The budget also specifies the goals for each administration and company, what they should do during the year to contribute to the overall goals. And in the environmental program, the goals are more accurately described and distributed with responsibilities to administrations and companies under this organization of the City of Stockholm. And then the Climate Action Plan contains calculations for each administration and company, stating how many tons of CO2 each administration and company will reduce by the end of 2023. Next. The city has created a CO2 budget. This is a climate budget that covers the climate impact of all activities that take place in the geographical city, with the residents, the business activities, and the city organization. And it's a total of 19 million tons of CO2 may be emitted during the period of 2020 to 2040. Thereafter, the city will work towards to be a climate positive city. We are just planning how we will receive that. Yes, next. Yes. Each year, the total climate emissions are calculated. That's shown in this table. At the bottom, the dark blue parts of the bars show the energy use for heating. And in the middle of the bar, emissions from electricity use. And on the top, the light blue shows emissions from transportations. And the solid line shows the CO2 emissions per capita in the city. And as you can see, emissions from heating have decreased significantly. This is due to a change from oil heating to renewable fuels in district heating or installations of heat pumps in buildings. Although the city has grown quite a bit since 1990, electricity use has not increased. This, in combination with electricity production becoming increasingly climately friendly, emissions from electricity use have also decreased. Then the transport includes road transports, working machines, ships in the port of Stockholm, as well as takeoffs and landings from the airport of Bromma. But as you can see, the reduction in climate impact is small when we're talking about transporting, and I will come back to that a little bit later in this. Next. Yeah, the city goal is, as I mentioned earlier, to be a fossil-free by 2040. And here you see the situation in the recent years. To the left is the energy from heating, and there it's about 80% is renewable today. In the middle, the climate impact of electricity use is reported, and we use a value for Nordic electricity production because the electric systems are interconnected. And here 95% is renewable and nuclear energy. The light green is nuclear. But as I said before, the big challenge for us is to achieve fossil freedom in the transport sector. Here you see the proportion of renewable fuels is about 40% in road traffic. But yesterday, in fact, the politicians decided that it will be significantly more expensive to drive and park fossil fuel cars by 2030. This requires change in the law, but it is probably necessary if we are to achieve fossil fuel-free transport sector by 2030. Many administrations and companies have climate conditions to be implemented during the period of 2000 and 2023, and they are listed in the climate roadmap. And here you see a selection of these conditions. It is effective when the city sets requirement for procurements of, for example, transport of goods to the city's administration and companies. It can be food deliveries to schools and elder care. It can also be requirements of construction working machines that working at streets and buildings and so on. With smart, with smart urban planning, we talk about buildings new buildings, that they will be placed close to public transport. And phasing out oil boilers is a priority. The goal is that we will be no oil boilers at all in the city of Stockholm 2023. And during the period, the city will install solar panels on the city owner's roof. So electricity production from solar cells is doubled compared with 2019. The traffic includes many parts, such as more bike lanes, better accessibility for buses, the expansion of charging stations for electric cars, and so on. And with the ships, when ships are at ship's docks, they often have the engine running to produce electricity for a ship, and it emits large amount of greenhouse gases. And the city therefore installs electricity charging that can be connected to the ships, and if the ships are connected, they get a lower port fee. Yes, now we take the next picture. Thank you. Of course, it's very important to make energy efficiency in existing buildings, and here is an example where energy efficiency improvements have been made by 60% in a house built 1961. And measures taken are additional insulation of exterior walls, new windows, heat recovery with heat pumps, energy recovery of heat from wastewater, and so on and so on. But one also very important thing is that the residential that are living in the houses now say to us that the indoor climate has been much, much better after the renovation. Yes. And in the city of Stockholm, we had harder energy requirements in new production of buildings compared with the national requirements. And here is an example of a so-called plus energy house that produce all the energy need for heating, hot water and electricity for the building with solar cells. And the project was carried out as a competition where builders proposed solutions. The team who had the best solution won and got the building permissions. This is an example where the city works close with a business company to find new solutions to difficult challenges. And the result is very good for us. Yes, here an example from the very far north of the world. In Sweden, we need to heat our houses, and district heating has meant a lot to reduce the climate impact. But now we are trying to install bio-CCS, and then the city can capture 800,000 tons of CO2 every year and send the carbon dioxide for permanent storage in cavities in the grounds. But I think that even in warm countries, the technology with CCS can be interesting. For example, if you burn waste and then also generate electricity at the same time, then you take care of the waste in an environmental way while generating climate neutral electricity. And you can also get cold water to a cooling system in buildings if you use adsorption technology at a facility. So we think this is the future with CCS in different ways around the world, I will say.
Ariane, just the timekeeping, there's 1 minute.
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, road transport is a challenge. And as you see here, it is how many of environmental cars we have in the city, and very much of the cars nowadays are electric cars. We take the next. And we have also installed this congestion charging zone, and that was a very good way to decrease the emissions, and the traffic has decreased with 20%, and now we can see it's mostly no private cars driving around in the city anymore. And the last picture is follow-up and reporting. I think that's very important. And important to ensure that the climate goals are achieved is follow-up and reporting to the politicians. So every year, energy statistics are complied and calculations are made of climate impact, and the follow-up are complied in the report sent to the politicians. And also, every year, administrations and company can also send proposals for measures that they wish to take. And with this, the politicians can put into the new budget different goals for the next year to be achieved by the companies and the administrations. So with this, I hope you have an overview of how we work with energy and climate issues in the city of Stockholm. And with that, I will say thank you.
Perfect, Ariane. Thanks so much for taking us to the municipal perspective of how to do climate policy. Indeed, you mentioned transportation and electricity, and that's a good way to move to our second session today of Swedish industry solutions. And indeed, we do have Volvo and ABB to talk with us about these two sectors. So thanks a lot. In the second session, we're going to talk about Swedish industry action. And to start us off, I want to invite Anne-Marie Finnman. She's the Counselor for Innovation Affairs here in the Swedish Embassy in Tel Aviv, and the head of the Swedish Innovation Agency, Vinnova, their office in Tel Aviv. Anne-Marie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just need to make sure, right, I think that, right, there we are. I think that we can all agree that, I think it's been mentioned already, that the current challenges that we're facing, it requires innovation. So I will tell you a little bit about the Sweden-Israel Innovation Initiative, which is an initiative by Vinnova, Sweden's innovation agency, to collaborate, to work with collaboration between Sweden and Israel to create innovation. So as we said, innovation, it's more important than it ever has been. And we need to shift whole systems in a new direction, not just create small innovations. We need those too, but we need to shift whole systems, and we need to innovate how we innovate. And in order to do that, international collaboration is a key success factor. Without international collaboration, we will not be able to achieve a sustainable future. I mean, we are all in this together, and we need to solve it together. So Vinnova is Sweden's innovation agency. We work to promote and facilitate innovation, sustainable growth through funding of innovation projects, to increase Sweden's competitiveness and for the benefit of society. We're a government agency under the Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation. We have around 200 employees. We invest around 350 million euros per year in innovation projects, and in around 4,000 projects each year. We have offices in Stockholm, obviously, where most of us are based, in Brussels, which is a policy office. We have our first innovation office in Silicon Valley, and only the second innovation office that we have in the world is here in Tel Aviv, and we opened it in 2018. So our role is primarily to invest in research and innovation. We also work with the European Union and the various funding initiatives there. And we provide the Swedish government with expertise within our specialty areas around research and innovation. So here in Tel Aviv, we work it's a government assignment, and the overall task is to work with innovation collaboration between Sweden and Israel, and to connect Sweden's and Israel's innovation ecosystems. We both have very strong ecosystems. They are in many ways complementary, and working together, we think that we can achieve a lot of beneficial, both systemic and other types of innovation. And it's also obviously for mutual benefit, both for Sweden and for Israel, and and on a global basis. So there is we have an office at Mindspace, which is a co-working space in central Tel Aviv, and also an office at the Embassy of Sweden. So I'm not going to go through all of these areas, but these are the strategic, both societal challenges and innovative abilities that Vinnova overall has chosen to organize its work on and to focus on it in our work. And as you can see here, what I really want to point out is that sustainability is a key part of what we do. It pervades all of our programs, and it's a part of our evaluation processes, and it's a part of all of the initiatives and activities that we do. Here in Israel, our main focus is around food systems, mobility systems, and precision health, but we're also collaborating on digital transformation, primarily artificial intelligence and cyber, and obviously ecosystem building. And just to mention a few of the initiatives that we have going on at the moment. The main one is the Connector. It's a lot about creating collaboration, and working with innovation is a lot about connecting people and organizations. So we have the initiative, which is a platform for creating an environment for collaboration between Sweden and Israel. It's various types of formats, the main one being a conference with panel discussions and matchmaking possibilities in order to form project consortia to do joint innovation projects.
Marie, just for timekeeping, we have 1 minute.
Yes, okay, thank you. The second one I will mention is the Nordic Israeli Innovation Academy, which is a collaboration between all of the Nordic embassies here in Israel, where it's a train the trainer program for Nordic innovation leaders, where we provide tutorials, roundtables, podcasts, and also mentoring programs to form connections and to do knowledge exchange around working with startups and working with ecosystems in the green tech space. And you can learn more about these initiatives, for instance, on the LinkedIn group that we have for the Sweden-Israel Innovation Initiative. And we're also very interested in hearing what you think we ought to be doing that we're not doing. So please, if you have good ideas, don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Anne-Marie. And of course, whoever wants to get in touch, either through the email or through us, we'll be happy to convey the messages. Let's go now to examples from Swedish industry. And first, I want to invite Ronen Aaron, who's going to speak in Hebrew, I understand, is the CEO of ABB Technologies, a Swedish company, but based or their office in Israel. Ronen, if you're here, the floor is yours. And sorry, just for our colleagues from outside of Israel, if you want to hear it translated to English, just press the interpretation and choose English. Ronen, the floor is yours. We can't hear you.
Yeah. Now, can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Okay, so actually my presentation will be a kind of a hybrid presentation. It will start in English and then I will move to Hebrew. I'm going to speak about digital solutions for the future of the smart cities. In the agenda itself, I will speak about how to utilize the technological prosperity that is driven by the fourth industrial revolution and how to improve the life level of citizens. I will describe the fourth industrial revolution, the citizens' need, the assets and infrastructure that have decisive impact on the quality of the life of the citizens in cities, of course. And I will show several references and projects that we made. Few words about ABB. I'm sure that most of the people know us. We are, I would say, a global company that is leading in electrification and in motion, process automation, as well as in robotics. We are operating in more than 100 countries, and we have more than 100,000 employees. Of course, our priorities is technology and digital innovation and sustainability. Part of our innovation, actually, we were ranked at the top 10 companies by the Fortune magazine related to our leadership in e-mobility. And this is something that I would say represent our wish to take ahead the technology in order to support the human life. So now I will move to Hebrew. It will be much more faster. So אני אדבר בעצם על הטכנולוגיות שמניעות את החדשנות בערים חכמות. אנחנו בעצם, אם אנחנו מדברים על המהפכה התעשייתית הרביעית, אז בעצם אנחנו נזכיר את שלושת המהפכות התעשייתיות הראשונות שהתחילו בעצם בסוף המאה ה-18, שימוש במים וקיטור על מנת למכן את הייצור, שימוש בחשמל לצורך ייצור המוני, התחיל בעצם בתחילת המאה ה-20, בתחילות שנות ה-70 בעצם התחילה המהפכה התעשייתית השלישית, שימוש באלקטרוניקה ובטכנולוגיית מידע, על מנת למכן ולהביא לאוטומציה של הייצור, והמהפכה התעשייתית הרביעית שאנחנו חווים אותה כרגע זה בעצם שימוש במכונות חכמות שמקושרות ביניהם לאינטרנט, מה שבעצם מאפיין את המהפכה התעשייתית הרביעית זה שהקצב השינוי שלה בזמן הוא אקספוננציאלי יחסית לשלושת המהפכות התעשייתיות הראשונות שהיו ליניאריות, והתפתחות טכנולוגית תמיד הייתה קיימת, אבל בטח לא בהיקף ולא בקצב שאנחנו חווים היום. אנחנו מדברים היום על אנרגיה מתחדשת, על אוטומציה בייצור, חישה מרחוק, אני אדבר הרבה על נושא של IoT, נושא של תיאום דיגיטלי, מציאות מדומה, אנליטיקה ובינה מלאכותית, כמובן תחבורה אוטונומית וחומרים חדשים. המרכיבים העיקריים בעצם של התמורה הדיגיטלית זה השימוש, היכולת שלנו להשתמש היום באמצעים של בינה מלאכותית, בעצם ההתפתחות של היכולת שלנו לאגור נתונים בחוות שרתים, זאת אומרת היכולת שלנו בעצם להשתמש בביג דאטה ולממש את האלגוריתמים שחלקם אגב לא כל כך חדש, חלקם פותח כבר לפני 50 ו-60 שנה, אבל היכולת שלנו לאבד את הנתונים יחד עם הביג דאטה בעצם מאפשר לנו היום לעשות שימוש הרבה יותר רחב בבינה מלאכותית, הרבה יותר ממה שהיה בעבר, ואנחנו נראה שהבינה המלאכותית בעצם תשנה את חוקי המשחק בטווח הבינוני והארוך. אם אנחנו מדברים על אינטרנט של הדברים, בעצם אנחנו מדברים על קישוריות של סנסורים זולים שמחוברים ביניהם לאינטרנט, לענן, ובענן בעצם יש לנו את האפליקציות שבהם אנחנו מבצעים את העיבוד של המידע שמגיע מאותם סנסורים, ובעצם אני יכול להגיד שהשימוש ב-IoT הוא מהפכה אמיתית, שבעצם תשנה את היכולת שלנו לנהל את הנכסים שלנו ולנהל בעצם את כל מערך החשמל והאנרגיה. רק בשביל לסבר את האוזן, ב-2020 יותר מ-33 מיליארד מכשירים חוברו לאינטרנט על מנת לתת קצת תחושה לגבי הכמויות וההיקפים שאנחנו מדברים עליהם. אי אפשר לדבר על לשפר את רמת החיים של תושבי הערים בלי לדבר בעצם מהם הצרכים שלהם. אז קודם כל תושבים רוצים לגור בעיר נקייה, נטולת זיהום אוויר ורעש, רוצים מי שתייה ראויים, עיר שבטוח לגור ולנוע בה 24/7 בכל מקום, בכל זמן. אנחנו רוצים זמינות של אספקת חשמל, מים וגז ללא הפסקה, וכמובן אנחנו גם רוצים שאותם שירותים ישרדו גם במצבי קיצון של הצפות, רעידות אדמה או מגפות. אנחנו רוצים נגישות מהירה, זאת אומרת תחבורה ציבורית מהירה ונגישה לכל נקודה בעיר. אנחנו כמובן רוצים גם מגוון רחב של שירותים לאזרח. אנחנו רוצים שהעיר שאנחנו חיים בה היא תהיה עיר ברת קיימא שאינה משפיעה לרעה על הסביבה. אנחנו מדברים בעיקר על פליטות, מחזור וטיפול בשפכים, ואת כל זה, זה לא שווה אם עלות המחיה לא תהיה בעצם נמוכה או זמינה לכל תושבי הערים. אז כשאנחנו מסתכלים בעצם על ערים היום, אז האתגרים בניהול אזורים מאוכלסים בצפיפות, אז בעצם אנחנו מדברים על תשתיות ישנות ובלויות, אנחנו מדברים על בניינים חסרי תשתיות, חלקם בכלל אין בהם תשתיות, כל מיני מבנים היסטוריים שיש בהם יעילות אנרגטית נמוכה, או יכולת הגישה שלנו אליהם היא יחסית מוגבלת, וכמובן הנושא של זיהום אוויר ותחבורה שכמובן קורות בערים ככל שהצפיפות הולכת וגדלה, ככל שהערים הולכות וגדלות. אז אני אתחיל בנושא הראשון שבעצם יעזור לנו לשפר חלק משמעותי מרמת החיים שלנו בעיר, כמובן שימוש בתחבורה חשמלית, תחבורה שקטה ללא פליטות ומזהמים. אפשר לראות את כל הנקודות שאותה תחבורה חשמלית שנהיית הרבה יותר נגישה וזמינה היום בישראל, גם אנחנו מדברים גם על תחבורה ציבורית וגם על תחבורה פרטית, אז אנחנו נראה כמובן ערים נקיות יותר, ברות קיימא, תהיה נגישות טובה יותר לכל נקודה בעיר, וכמובן אנחנו מצפים שעלות המחיה תהיה נמוכה, בגלל היתרונות המאוד גדולים של תחבורה ציבורית חשמלית. יש פה רפרנס שהבאתי משוודיה, מעיר בגטנבורג. אנחנו החל מ-2020 התחילו לפעול בגטנבורג כ-157 אוטובוסים חשמליים חדשים של וולבו, והם מופעלים בעזרת פתרונות טעינה שלנו מאוד מתקדמים, אפשר לראות פה פנטוגרף וכמובן מטענים מהירים שנמצאים גם בדיפות וגם לאורך הדרך שבו בעצם האוטובוסים והכלים הציבוריים האלה פועלים. אני רוצה לדבר עכשיו על נושא של מבנים חכמים. רק בשביל לתת לכם תחושה, מבנים צורכים היום כסדר גודל של 40% מכל צריכת החשמל העולמית, ככה שכל שיפור בהתייעלות האנרגטית של מבנים היא בעצם חוסכת הרבה מאוד בפלטות וכמובן בהוצאות הכספיות על מיזוג ועל חימום. דיברו על זה הרבה מאוד מקודם. אנחנו מדברים על מערכות שבעצם מקושרות לענן, מאפשרות לנו בעזרת ממשק ידידותי ונוח להתחבר לאותן מערכות. אנחנו רוצים להבטיח את הגישה בעזרת מערכות גישה למבנים. אנחנו רוצים כמובן לייעל את כל צריכת החשמל במבנה, אם זה בעזרת מערכות מתקדמות כמו מערכות KNX, מערכות דלי, או מערכות אחרות שבעצם מאפשרות לנו לייעל בצורה משמעותית את צריכת האנרגיה של המבנים. אגב, כאנקדוטה, אנחנו מתכוונים, ABB, אנחנו מתכוונים בתחילת שנה הבאה לעבור למבנה חדש. המבנה הזה יהיה ירוק, ואפשר כמובן לבקר אותו ולראות את כל הטכנולוגיות החדשות והמתקדמות האלה שאנחנו מדברים עליהן.
On end timekeeping, we have 3 minutes.
אוקיי, thank you. אפשר לראות עוד דוגמה מאוד מעניינת של בניין בשוויץ, שלמעשה נותק לחלוטין מאספקת החשמל החיצונית, בעזרת מערכות שאנחנו סיפקנו בבניין הזה. בבניין הזה גרות 9 משפחות, וכמובן הם לא התפשרו לא על הנוחות ולא על היכולת שלהם לחיות בצורה איכותית וטובה ברמת חיים שהם הורגלו אליה, גם כשהם צרכו את האנרגיה מרשתות חשמל שמגיעות מחברות החשמל המקומית. אנחנו רוצים לנהל את הנכסים שלנו בכל מקום, בכל זמן. אפשר לראות את זה דרך את היתרונות שאנחנו מזהים פה, כמובן הקטנה של זמני הדממה והקטנה בהשקעות שנדרשות. אנחנו רואים שכל המערכות האלה גם הן מערכות מבוססות ענן, שהן בטוחות לחלוטין ומחוברות לאפליקציה שנמצאת בענן. אפשר לראות את כל היתרונות של המערכת הזאת. דוגמה מאוד מעניינת היא דוגמה מדובאי, בעצם מבורג' חליפה, הבניין הגבוה בעולם. אנחנו התקנו בבניין הזה, אפשר לראות רק את צריכת האנרגיה שלו למערכות המיזוג, אנחנו מדברים על 24 מגוואט. התקנו חיישנים שמעבירים מידע בזמן אמת, כמובן אנחנו מנטרים את כל מצב הנכסים בבניין, ויש לנו, עברנו בעצם מתחזוקת שבר / תחזוקה מונעת לתחזוקה חזויה בבניין. עוד רפרנס מאוד מעניין שמשלב בעצם אנרגיה מתחדשת, אנרגיה סולארית, יחד עם מערכת אגירת אנרגיה באחד המפעלים שלנו בגרמניה. שוב, מערכת שכולה מחוברת לענן ומקושרת ומאפשרת בעצם לנצל באופן מקסימלי את היתרונות הגדולים של אותם מקורות אנרגיה חלופיים, כולל אגירת אנרגיה. אי אפשר לדבר על מערכות אגירת אנרגיה בלי שאנחנו מדברים גם על ה-utilities, על חברות החשמל, כמובן גם על חברות כמו מקורות, חברות שמספקות להם מים, מספקות לנו מים או אנרגיה, גם להם יש לנו את אותם פתרונות, כמובן שהפתרונות האלה מותאמים לאותן חברות. אפשר לראות פה רפרנס מאוד מעניין משדה התעופה בדלהי, זה אחד משדות התעופה הגדולים בעולם. הכנסה של המערכות שאנחנו מדברים עליהן בעצם עזרה להם לחסוך סדר גודל של 30% מצריכת האנרגיה. המערכות עצמם הן מערכות פשוטות, זה העיקרון של המערכת, שימוש במערכות שהן ברמה של plug and play, מערכות שבעצם מאפשרות לנו הנדסה מינימלית, תוך שימוש באפליקציות שאנחנו בעצם מעדכנים אותן אונליין בענן. אפשר לראות פה אספקת מים, מערכת שלנו שמיועדת לאספקת מים, כמובן לתחנות שאיבה, מערכות של מתקני התפלה ומערכות של מסירה וחלוקת מים. רפרנס מאוד...
Just one last slide, Ronen, if possible.
Thank you. This is the last slide. הסלייד האחרון שאני אציג אותו זה בעצם שיתוף פעולה שנעשה בין ABB לבין חברת סטארט-אפ ישראלית בשם Co2. אנחנו חסכנו סדר גודל של 150 מיליון קוב מים במערכות שאנחנו סיפקנו עם חברת Co2, מערכת שבעצם מנטרת זליגות של מים ברשתות מוניציפליות, ואפשר לראות את היתרונות העצומים של אותן מערכות. אנחנו פה זמינים לענות לכם וגם כמובן להעביר לכם את המצגות שלנו גם בעברית וגם באנגלית. תודה רבה על ההקשבה ואנחנו זמינים לכל שאלה שהיא. תודה.
Thanks a lot, Ronen. There are actually many questions in the chat, but we don't have time for Q&A, so we will make sure to convey the messages to you offline, and then you can liaise with the people that asked. So thanks a lot, Ronen, for the time. Our next topic has been mentioned several times. It's transportation, and Sweden's Climate Act does actually have a goal of 70% reduction by 2030 of emissions from transportation. And we have with us James Lundström. He's the head of circular economy at Volvo, Volvo Cars, to share with us their work on climate issues and climate adaptations. James, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for having me. I just want to check that you can hear me and see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Yes. So yet again, thank you for having me and allowing us to share how we as a company, but also in the context of being a Swedish company, is approaching climate neutrality in the transport sector. Volvo Cars is probably a well-known company to most of you, but what we are doing in this transition is not only looking at technology and different types of technical solutions, but also in a business context and interaction with city development and city planning. So one of the more obvious changes, which might not be seen so much in the context of sustainability and climate neutrality, is that we've actually split into two new segments within the company that is more looking to direct consumer business and car as a service. So we have one service that is called Care by Volvo, which I would exemplify by owning a cell phone or subscribing to a cell phone where the phone is in part of the contract. So you have a monthly fee and you continuously can replace your product to the latest technology and adapt very quickly and easily to your needs. And the other one that we've started is a company called M, and I will show some pilot examples from Stockholm where we are working with car sharing services and how that helps in secondary perspectives to have impact on climate neutrality. We are also a company that has started a fully electric car brand in Polestar, and we're also working together with our owner, which is Geely Group, with a new company called Lynk & Co, also focusing a lot on newer customers with newer needs in this area. And finally, and I have to admit the slide is, since a couple of weeks, it's actually not Zenuity, it's Zenzact, and that is a company looking on how we can implement autonomy functionality towards autonomous drive in this new segment and landscape of transport that is ever so quickly shifting in our regions. Now, Volvo is very much known for safety, and I think no one thinks Volvo without thinking safety. And what we're trying to explain to the world and what we're showing now is that we have moved sustainability up to the same level as safety within our company. That means that every decision that goes to our board of directors or to our executive management team not only has to show what it does to our safety impact to the world, but also how sustainability is included in that. And in many markets, we are now actually saying that the biggest safety challenge of all that we have to face is climate change. And we need to address this, and we need to do it quickly. And that needs to do by us as a company, but also in conjunction and cooperation with our suppliers, our partners, and also in the infrastructure and city development as well. Why I think this might be sort of knocking down already open doors, but consumers are very concerned. The research, as was shown here by Ms. Romson and Mr. Ullenhag, I mean, there is no question about what is needed to stop climate change. And a lot of it can be done through political movement, but in the end, the products and the goods we consume are produced by industry, and therefore industry has to take this extremely seriously and has to show proactiveness in the development. Some things, and I know later we're getting into green bonds in this conference, but what we're seeing is also a huge shift in the investment market, that investing in unsustainable business is simply not being interesting anymore, and they are quickly shying away from it. So what we have done as a company, we say that we will be climate neutral by 2040, and changing our products and electrification will take us a long way, but you also have to look at the way you do business and what you're doing business with. A car is still dependent on a lot of material, on a lot of goods. So we also have to become a circular business in how we approach the use of materials and the use of goods and what we do with the goods when it's no longer suitable to be a car. And also a growing concern is working conditions, social and ethical considerations in extracting raw materials, in the use of raw materials and the processing, where we have said that we want to be a leader in this. And we're taking a number of steps here to assure that no one at any place in the supply chain is in any way exposed to unacceptable conditions. And that is a constantly moving target that we are trying to do our best to help improve and move positive progress in. As I said, we talk about being climate neutral by 2040, but there's a number of steps that has to be done to get there. And this is showing sort of how we are trying to break this down. So we have set an interim target, or our first interim target, by 2025. And by then we say that we will reduce our tailpipe emissions by 50%. But as you can show here in the graph to the right side, the tailpipe emissions are the left-hand bars. That will not take us, even if we got to zero, we will still have a significant climate impact of our products due to the materials and goods that we use. So there needs to be a reduction in operational emissions and in supply chain emissions as well. We see that it is feasible to get to 25% reduction in those towards 2025. But as mentioned previously, by 2040, we have to reduce all of this to zero to become a truly climate neutral company. What I also mentioned is that we do new types of products, and M, as I mentioned, with Car as a Service, is a very new company. It's only been around for a few years. We're running pilots in 12 cities right now. But what we see is a significant change in consumer behavior, and this needs to be integrated as well. And I think the key takeaway that we've learned from Stockholm is that one M car reduces roughly 8 individual cars that are being driven, that take up space, that use material and resources to maintain over time. So we see that one part of achieving climate neutrality is actually changing the consumer behavior. And we do believe that we have to move a lot more into offering services rather than selling individual products, and hence the reason that we have started these companies. We also see that the behavior and learnings from these customers is that they realize that they don't have to be as dependent on vehicles. They also realize that the type of vehicles they're looking for in this case, instead of buying a car that needs to meet your family vacation need 1 to 2 weeks a year, they're now looking for cars that are easy to use in a city environment, smaller cars, more efficient vehicles. So we change consumer behavior by changing the way we interact and do business with the customers. To expand on this, we're looking at a similar example, and this is in Gothenburg, where we're looking at what's called the Green City Zone. And there we are, it's a research project with the goal is that by 2030, we should have a fossil-free transport system in the center of Gothenburg. That will, of course, depend a lot on public transit and public transport, but there also needs to be individual solutions in that. This is an ongoing research, but where we see that the type of products and the type of services that we can provide, we can help city development. And the end result is, well, of course, the obvious effects listed here, but also more easy access to every individual to gain access to transport. You don't have to take the upfront investment of owning a vehicle or owning a product for your transport. And also things like minimized parking needs and actually being able to plan a city differently that is not fully dependent on the same amount of parking and standstill space in this case. Now, these things are, how should I say, primary and secondary. We can switch to electrification, we can change the behavior of the consumers, but we don't get around the fact that a car is a big product. It uses a lot of material. It has a tremendous amount of legal requirements on how it has to perform, meaning that it will be a resource-intense product no matter how you design it. And the next step then is to look in how are we using our materials. And same thing here, we say a circular business by 2040, which essentially means nothing of a car gets thrown away during its lifetime or when it is recycled. There has to be a secondary plan for everything. The interim step by 2025 is that we will work with 25% recycled plastic materials, 40% recycled aluminum, and 25% recycled steel. And just today, or sorry, yesterday, we published a press release where we will work together with the Swedish steel supplier SSAB in using their fossil-free steel called the hybrid process, which they are developing. We will show it in concepts in 25 and then looking in products after that. So in order to become climate neutral, there's a lot that can be done in the consumer goods industry and durable goods industry, but a key aspect of reaching the target is to actually have a detailed plan on where you get your materials from and what will you do with them once the product has served its lifespan. One example of this is we're looking into batteries, since we're switching heavily into electrification, and that there needs to be a second life plan for batteries. So we're doing it both from a large and small scale research perspective. So we have worked in using our own EV batteries that have been done for development to offload the grid in charging stations. So if you have many people charging at the same time at peak hours, the peak loads will be very high, and you can offset that by using a battery. On a more large scale, we have a research project with one of the Swedish energy suppliers using hydropower, where they actually can use our batteries for interim storage. So instead of having, for instance, when we have flooding in springs, instead of having to waste that energy, we can store that in large scale battery energy storage situations. And while batteries might not be readily available right now, as the progression towards electrification will increase, so will also the accessibility to these type of batteries, and thereby making those applications even more easy to get by, which would help to offset the transitional loads that we get from wind power, hydropower, and other of the renewable energy sources, which currently is a grid balancing issue. So to show also that this is being recognized and coming into green bonds that I said I would, we have actually, in this transition, we have published our own green bond. It was done last year, and we had an external rating of our company, which got us into the dark green. And for those who are familiar with green bonds, that is the best rating you can get, and showing that we are very actively progressing in this area. And what we're doing then is we are basically getting companies to invest in our development to get to the carbon neutrality and the circular business. And we think that this is one of the futures we will see in the finance industry, is that this will become a critical aspect of investments to be able to show that you can do this. This will help from the finance and the industrial market also to drive companies to very quickly become much more sustainable and environmentally conscious. And simply because the companies who do not do this will have difficulty in attracting capital in the future. So this is a little bit about our journey, how we are, through our investments, through our business plan, and through our technology development, doing our best to be the fastest transitioning automotive company towards climate neutrality and towards becoming a circular business and towards being a sustainable part in solving the transport issue of the future, both cities and rural. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time.
Perfect, James. Thanks so much for this presentation. And I also loved your final sentence. In many companies, the topic of circular economy and the topic of climate change are siloed separately. I love the fact that you connect them together, because indeed, climate change cannot be tackled without a circular perspective. It's instrumental to understanding the climate crisis and the solutions. So thanks so much for this presentation and these words. We now want to go to smaller scale companies from Sweden, but very promising. And Erik is with us, and thanks so much for joining, because I know you have a crazy day today. So Erik then is CEO of Sea Green Technology, and is going to talk to us about cows. Please, Erik.
Thank you. Do you see Rosa?
Yes.
The cow? That's great.
Yes.
So this is Rosa, I'm Erik, and we both produce wet waste. Wet waste is today something that is not very valuable and not used very well. It creates quite a bit of greenhouse gases. To address the challenges with the greenhouse gas emissions, we need to capture carbon. And one way to do that is do it from chimneys and take the carbon dioxide from there and cool it down. And it's extremely expensive. And we believe that there is a cheaper way, and by capturing the wet carbon. And there is quite a bit of wet carbon. It's from industrial sludges, from food waste, and from sewage and manure. And by converting this to an inert biocoal, we can get control of it and make use of it or store it. And it's quite big amounts. Globally, we're talking about 5.7 billion tons. And about half a ton per person on Earth. 100 kilo for sewage, and then the rest for connected to our daily consumption. And this waste contains a lot of stuff that we don't want to have out in the ecosystem. Still, in Sweden, pretty much 100% ends out of the ecosystem. And this is an environmental and climate problem that needs a change. Due to its impact, of course, costs are rising with increased requirements on how this is handled. So what if there was a solution that could completely eliminate this CO2 impact, where we could also eliminate a lot of spreading of riskful substances in the environment, and improve the circularity, where the good stuff in this wet waste is reused. These 5.7 billion tons, if you make use of that carbon, it's the carbon content and the energy value of that equals to the power production of Europe. So it's quite a bit. And if you could make use of that and replace fossil fuel, that's pretty good as well. And what if you could do all of this and actually lower your cost? Wouldn't that be good? And actually, that's what Sea Green is all about. And here, going to show you our first plant in Finland, at Stora Enso pulp mill.
I'm here at Stora Enso's mill in Heinola, Finland. Sea Green works together with Stora Enso to build the world's first oxy-power HTC plant using our unique technology to convert wet sludge into solid biofuel. The plant is now operational, and each year it will turn 18,000 tons of sludge into biofuel. The impact of sludge handling is not so well known, but it is a major climate and environmental problem. Sludge from the treatment of wastewater from industries, households, and food production causes greenhouse gas emissions. can spread dangerous substances in the environment and can pose health risks. With our new technology, we can lift sludge handling into the modern circular bioeconomy and harvest useful resources from what have been, until now, seen as waste. In this plant, the sludge is turned into a carbonated biofuel using oxygen from the air to power the process. Here at Stora Enso's mill, the biofuel is incinerated in the boiler, which means they need less external fuel. The boiler produces energy for the mill and for heating the town of Heinola. The biofuel is safer and easier to handle than sludge, with a volume of less than 20% of the sludge. Here in Heinola, the water removed from the sludge is used to increase the mill's biogas production and to help reduce the need of chemicals for the biological water treatment. Seagreen's sludge handling technology effectively stops greenhouse gas emissions from sludge storage. The biofuel produced can replace fossil fuels. In future plants, it will be possible to separate nitrogen from the process and replace fossil fuel-based fertilizers. This first commercial oxypower HTC plant is just the beginning. Here, sludge is no longer a waste problem and a climate threat, but the source of useful bio-based products. This is the solution to the global sludge challenge.
That's our first full-scale plant in operation in Finland. Handles about 20,000 tons per year. So what's Oxypower OTC and Seagreen all about? So we take sludge or another wet waste stream and produce a hydrochar, and we do it with a combination of two technologies called hydrothermal carbonization and wet oxidation. That enables us actually to do that without adding external energy. We're using the dissolved carbon from a pressure cooking process to power the process with air, with a process called wet oxidation. And this makes this extremely energy efficient and also cost efficient, because you don't need to have a power plant near it producing some heat to heat up all this sludge. So it's arranged in the process. It also enables with this the extraction of nitrogen that's in the sludge, and in the long run, the phosphorus will end up in the biocoal, and it can be extracted later if you incinerate it from the ashes. So what happens when you pressure cook wet waste? Well, if you put the temperature around 200 degrees, it will carbonate. So then this discovery was awarded a Nobel Prize 1931 by a guy by Fredrik Bergius. And that's what we do. So what's happening is pretty much what's happening in nature, but it takes 1 million years to go from organic matter into coal through peat and brown coal and hard coal. And here it just takes a couple of minutes to achieve a similar transformation. And by letting it sit for a while, it creates bigger and bigger particles that separate from water, as you can see in the picture there. And then it's easy to dewater this. And this carbon particles, they are hydrophobic, so it's very, very easy to with just mechanical dewatering to get them remove between 85 and 95% of the water that you have in the incoming sludge stream. And this water can be reused. That I think that could be useful and valuable in Israel, where you have a very scarce amounts of water. And what happens in wet oxidation? So when we pressure cook the sludge, 70% of the carbon ends up in the solid product, 15% ends up in water. And then the black stuff looking like coffee, what it looks like when you take it out. By blowing air or oxygen in that at high temperature, we produce the heat needed to power the process, but also clean the water. So you'll get an end water that looks like the very weak apple juice you see next to the no wet ox picture, which is quite clean. So for sewage treatment plants, one of their major concerns is actually what to do. Wastewater treatment plants that take care of sewage is what to do with their end product, the sludge. because there's a lot of regulations, it smells, it's full of pathogens, there are environmental concerns. What we enable is actually to create completely sludge-free wastewater treatment plants. So by integrating our technology in our plant with a wastewater treatment plant, you will have a plant that gets sewage water in, and the end product is clean water and a clean biochar. We have a Swedish municipality in the north of Stockholm that want to build the world's first integrated plant with us, the first sludge-free wastewater treatment plant. This is all in Swedish, but it's about what they want to do in this community and their CEO. And they want to do it with this, our plant, and it's not only a beautiful technology, I think it also looks nice. So we want to make plants that are nice to look at. I mean, if they are in rural areas, it's good to have buildings that are nice looking. It's standardized plants, the capacity with 25,000 tons per year, between 20 and 30, depending on the dry matter content. And depending on how far we drive the cleaning of the return water, we will produce actually overproduce heat more than we need for our own process. So there's a possibility to deliver heat or steam that could be used for other purposes. And this is not only good for the environment.
Eric, just I'm keeping one last slide.
Oh, so one last slide. Okay, so time goes fast. All right. So from a business perspective, if you can eliminate the spreading of sludge, you eliminate costs. And it depending, I don't know the cost of sludge disposal in Israel, but in the cities in Europe, is typically between 80 and 100 euro per ton to get rid of it. And if you can get rid of 20,000 tons of sludge disposal costs, that's between 2 and 2.5 million euro in removed costs. And you remove the need of transportation because you have less matter, and you have to value create it. So it's very interesting product also from a value creation perspective. Am I running out of time? So then I am there.
Yeah, you have that's perfectly 10 minutes. Any last comments? Or is this the end?
Now I have a last comment. I think with the transformation of cities all over the world, where today's sludge handling is not viable anymore, they have to change. I think we believe we have a very good solution that could meet that need head on. Yeah, we're ready to deliver that to you.
Conquer the world.
If you're interested, yes.
Super, great. And we have some questions to you, but we will send them offline, as we said. And I can say that with these kind of solutions for sludge treatment and alternatives to fossils, we can see why Sweden is taking such bold decisions and bold goals to become fossil free. I mean, the solutions are there or are being developed, and that's great to see. Yeah, so Erik, thanks so much. Good luck.
Thanks a lot for having me. Very much.
Thanks
pleasure.
for coming.
All right.
Good luck in your next presentation. We move ahead to another interesting company, and we have Eva Stoll with us. She's the project leader of the Biochar project, which is actually an interesting project initiated, if I understand correctly, and funded by local authorities. So an innovation project initiated by the local authorities. Eva, the floor is yours. If you can unmute, because we can still not hear you. We see the slides, Eva, but we cannot hear you. Okay. Eva, can you try again to unmute the mic? And if it's not working, we might try to change the order and get back to you.
Is it okay now?
Now it's okay.
Okay, very good.
Go ahead, thanks.
So welcome to Helsingborg. This is in the southwest of Sweden, and Helsingborg is also part of Greater Copenhagen. And right now you see the strait between Sweden, Helsingborg and Helsingør. And we are part of Greater Copenhagen, which is a cooperation to create sustainable growth and development of green innovation in the region. And the region, Greater Copenhagen, includes 85 municipalities, and 4.3 million people. Oops. Why am I not changing the slide? Oh, here we go. Okay, so NSR is the local municipal waste company serving about 250,000 citizens in the northwest region of Scania. The mission is to collect and treat the local waste from citizens and businesses. So we maximize the recycling and the reuse opportunities and minimize the negative environmental effects. The decision to invest in a biochar production plant was taken in 2019 to make better use of park and garden waste, go from delivering a biomass for heating to production of biochar, heat for the local district heating grid, and creating thereby a carbon sink. And parallel to this, NSR is taking part of several biochar projects in Sweden.
Eva, we can see the slide saying NSR Biochar Production. If you wanted to show another slide.
No, that's the right one.
That's all right, sorry.
Okay, so we are taking part. So not just the production unit and the plant, we are also taking part in different projects as well, and are doing that for the future as well with the academia and businesses. So just to start, what is biochar? So going back in history, the black carbon is an important component of the terra preta soil, a nutrient-rich and fertile soil discovered in the Amazon basin of Brazil. The presence of the black carbon in this soil has been dated back to hundreds of thousands of years, leading to the idea that soil application of biochar could lock carbon away from the atmosphere, contributing to climate change mitigation. That is the history. And going to the control process, it is a carbon produced by pyrolysis of biomass under oxygen-free conditions. It is a very controlled process that ensures consistent quality of the end product. And there are great possibilities to customize end product depending on the application. Concerning the properties, biochar application is considered beneficial to soil health as it contributes to build up soil organic matter, increase water retention capacity, and therefore support plant growth, leading to additional positive effects in terms of vegetation cover in urban, rural, and unmanaged ecosystem. And biochar is stable and has a high carbon content that can remain in the soil for a long time and is therefore an important source of negative CO2 emissions. So looking at today's application, soil amendment, it's an additive in soil for its structural improvement, nutritional and water retaining properties, and its ability to bind carbon. You can use it for filter applications, today very much water cleaning and stormwater solutions. Animal feed, which we understand is very big in Germany, for instance, but it's also a carbon sink of greenhouse gases. In the production, you will get some byproducts like bio oil, which is very much appreciated for energy, and wood vinegar, a replacement for synthetic chemicals. And this market is now developing quite fast, and especially in Sweden. So future research and development takes place in many areas. So starting with stabilization of contaminated soil from heavy metals, where we have been very active in a big project here in Sweden. We can replace peat in pot soils, which is a big business. And we can also look for more advanced filters. And right now, a project we're doing looking into a door filter of biogas production. And since the production is very agile, you can customize what kind of biochar you need. So pyrolysis, what is it? So really fast, it is where you can take any organic material and expose it to high temperature in a controlled environment, free from oxygen, that goes through a chemical and physical degradation. So conservation process, it is a carbon sink, and you also get the syngas as a byproduct when you produce it. And now going to our project in NSR. So here is our sort of local cycle starting from the left. We use the park and the garden waste. We shred it, we dry it, we store it. And then comes the pyrolysis plant. And then you produce the biochar that goes into the ground for the tree to grow. If you look on the top, you will see that since we are a waste company, we have a land mill that we can use for landfill gas. So we will produce our own electricity that we will use for the process as a total. And when the production is for the biochar is going, you get extra heat that goes to a heat exchanger and going out to the district heating grid. So we will actually supply around 1,000 households with heat. That's how much it is, 16 gigawatt hours. So looking at the project from a quick fact point of view, we made a 40 million euro investment. And as you said, we got some of that granted from Klimaatklivet, which is a state-owned support system. And we will then use 7 tons of park and garden waste, and that will be turned into 1,500 tons of biochar. And this will also be one of the biggest, or actually the biggest biochar production unit that will be now in Sweden. And since you take the 1,500 tons, and if you use it for the soil production, you will actually get about around 3,000 to 4,200 tons of carbon sequestration. So 1,500 gigawatt hours goes as like climate neutral heat to the district grid. And of course, there's a lot of synergies since we are a waste company with the landfill. So we can use the gas, we can use the biogas production that we have on our site. We can of course use all the equipment that are used for shredding and drying. And then the aggregation will be in next spring. So that was very short, but before I say thank you, I can just emphasize the UN Climate Panel that has really pointed out 3 techniques that is needed to be used quickly, and that is planting more trees, investing in the CCS, carbon capture storage, and invest in biochar. Thank you.
Indeed, that's exactly what I wanted to say at the end. Also, Drawdown mentioned biochar as one of the leading sequestration strategies, and indeed biochar looks very promising. Thanks so much for this presentation. I have several questions, but we don't have time for that, so we will send it offline. Thanks for your time and for this presentation. We now move to our third topic in this event, and that's financing, and especially this unique tool, I think was started in Sweden, I'm not sure, of the green municipal bonds. And we have 2 great speakers to share with us their experience on this unique tool that could be and should be adopted also in Israel. First, we start with Joran Firm, and he's the chairman of Kommuninvest Cooperative, which is he's going to tell us what it is, and he's going to introduce us to this instrument of green bonds and their use in Sweden. Joran, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I have with me my colleague Björn Bergstrand, who hopefully will be able to show you my presentation. I hope you're on board, Björn. But I can start by introducing myself a little bit. I'm the chairman of the board of Kommuninvest, which is a cooperative society owned by municipalities and regions in Sweden. The idea is here to give you a picture of how we finance the climate solutions in Swedish cities, municipalities, and regions. I'm a former mayor and a former member of the European Parliament, representing the Swedish Social Democratic Labour Party. I don't know if you can see my presentation. I hope Björn will be able to show it to you. Are you there, Björn? Yeah, here something comes up. Very good. That was the first slide, so we could just directly go to number 2. We often describe Kommuninvest. Let's see if we can get up the second picture here. Second slide.
Yeah, sorry, Göran. I'm just getting this sorted out here. Should be back online.
Okay. I'll continue talking, and you could catch up with me. There we are, and now switch to the next, please. There we are. We often describe Kommuninvest as the Swedish local government debt office, but we do operate on a free market, competing with banks and other financial institutions. Today, 96% of Swedish municipalities, cities, and 2/3 of the regions have voluntarily chosen to become members of Kommuninvest. They get close to 2/3 of all their loans from Kommuninvest. And this cooperative society owns Kommuninvest AB, which is our operative credit market company, a limited company where the members own 100% of the shares. So we finance investments of Swedish local and regional public sectors based on a concept of sustainability and based on a very important joint and several guarantee by the members, who all have their own independent taxation powers. That gives us very strong position on the market. We're AAA rated by both Moody's and Standard & Poor's. So next slide shows you the overall rapid development of sustainable financing in Sweden during the last 5 years. Here we are. 2016, this market was very small and completely dominated by local and regional governments, the blue parts of the bars, and to some extent banks, the green ones. But since then, there's been a huge expansion, mainly of private corporates, that is the gray parts, who dominate the markets today, but still local and regional governments are a very important part of the financing. Next slide, please. So in the local and regional sector, some regions and larger cities, we will soon listen to Stockholm, they do issue their own green bonds, but Kommuninvest, the blue bar, is by far the biggest issuer. The idea is to jointly give also small and medium-sized municipalities the opportunity to finance their green investments via competitive green bonds. We also want to integrate them in a good system for assessing green investments in a professional way and provide impact reporting. Our bonds are issued in Swedish krona and US dollars, mostly bought by both Swedish and international investors, often pension funds, but also many others. Next slide, please. So for 6 years now, we've operated a system for green loans available to all our members on certain conditions. The economic terms are very variable, with maturities from 3 to 25 years, small loans of less than 250,000 Swedish krona. A Swedish krona is about 1/10 of a euro, up to billions. Today, 12% of all our lending is green.
Apologies. Muting all.
Someone else came in there. So
yes, we just muted. Go ahead. Sorry. But I muted you too, so you would need to unmute. You're on. We need you need to unmute because we muted everybody.
Okay.
Perfect.
So there we are. So the idea was to give as much green loans to our municipalities in order to form the basis of issuing green bonds. And the first one was issued in 2016. Since then, we've issued 13 green bonds totaling some 5 billion euros. Those municipalities, regions, etc., they can apply for the green loans in 8 different categories. That's environmental management, water management, climate adaptation measures, green buildings, energy efficiency, waste management, public transportation, and investments in renewable energy. Next slide, please. So far, we have financed 450 investment projects. The green bars show dispersed and committed green loans, and the gray-brown ones issued green bonds. The municipalities have to apply for the loans according to a specific scheme so that we can both assess the applications according to recognized green standards, but also evaluate the effects of the projects. And as you can see, the pandemic has not had any negative effect. I think we will reach all-time high in 2021. Next slide. To manage this procedure, we have formed an experts committee. It consists of both climate and environment experts, most of them from our member cities, and financial experts from Kommuninvest. This committee shall audit and approve all the applications according to a set of general conditions. They shall review and decide on green loan reporting and impact reporting according to a very good framework which we have developed together with our counterparts in the other Scandinavian countries. A framework which was developed in order to avoid criticism of greenwashing, etc., and according to international green standards. And this framework has been internationally approved, recognized widely, and we have even achieved prizes for it. So finally, what are the results of these green investments financed by green bonds? We could come to the next slide, Björn. There we are. Well, first I can say that the use of this model has improved climate governance in local and regional governments. Their focus on the impact on sustainability of all those investments has increased, and they are much more aware now of ESG criteria, the environment, social, and governance criteria. It had an effect on planning, on financial policies, on investment plans, and very important, on budgets. Our framework is also used as a communications tool externally and internally, so that investors as well as taxpayers, staff, etc., will know for sure that these investments are not examples of greenwashing, but serious, thoroughly audited investments subject to professional impact reporting. We can also see how green investments and green finance stimulate internal cooperation in the city administration. From the beginning, many of the economic officers were a bit skeptical, while those who dealt with environmental issues were very interested. Today, we can see that the extra administrative work which many of them were afraid of has been developed in order to minimize bureaucratic procedures. And on top of that, we now know that it gives Kommuninvest access to cheaper funding than otherwise. Our green bonds show conditions that are normally slightly better, or at least similar to our regular bonds, and they are never worse. This is an advantage which we transfer to our members with green loans. So they come with a rebate of 2 basis points. That's not much, but it's enough to prove that green loans are not more expensive than others, on the contrary. Just finally, let me mention that we have just started a pilot project scheme with loans for social investments, with the aim of also issuing social bonds later this year, which we feel is a natural way forward on the road to local sustainable investments. Thank you very much.
Johan, thank you so much for this presentation. Third point, indeed, I really agree that it fosters internal cooperation. We reached out to many environmental leaders in local authorities in Israel, asked them to bring to this event their financial departments. And indeed, I agree with you that this is where these things connect with such innovative tools. Thanks a lot for your time and presentation. As with everybody, we don't have time for Q&A, but this was fascinating. Also, I see the comments in Hebrew. Next, after Joran, we have with us Irene Svenonius. Irene is the chairman of the board of Stockholm region, and Irene is going to show us how Stockholm is using green bonds to fund climate projects. And Irene is without a presentation, right? So it's perfect. Floor is yours, Irene.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here today and be able to speak about the actions Stockholm region are taking against climate change, and that we are really working with this in all aspects, even through financing investments. We have been extremely engaged in actions against climate change.
Just sorry, we have comments that the mic, if you can approach the mic maybe a bit, because we can't hear you well. That might work.
That's good.
Swedish innovation, exactly.
And now we'll see if you're happier.
Is Ella happy? Yes, Ella is happy. Perfect.
Oh, great. Then I start all over again. I'm sorry for the delay. Yeah, I'm Irene Svenonius, and I'm the chair of Stockholm Region's Executive Board. And I'm very proud to be here today. And I'm also proud of the work that Stockholm region has been doing for many years to take actions against climate change, for sustainable growth, and by taking to take responsibility for the environment. We have been very early adopters in that process. As early as 2014, the Stockholm region issued the first green bond. Back then, we were the first region in Sweden to initiate such a project. And since then, the project has expanded, and many other regions have followed in our footsteps. As we actually heard before, both cities and regions are doing this in Sweden now. And I'm proud to say that despite the pandemic, we are today the largest regional issuer of green bonds in Sweden. In total, the volume amounts to more than 14 billion Swedish kroners, and the money are used for sustainable projects that will be beneficial to the future, of course. As much as 60% of the region's debt portfolio today consists of environmentally friendly projects, either linked to our green bonds or loans linked to, for example, the European Investment Bank. By doing this, the region makes it much easier to find financing for projects that will be beneficial both for the region's climate and welfare ambitions, but also for our ambitions on increased economic growth. Our goal is for the Stockholm region to be climate neutral by the year 2045. And this requires both investments and hard work. We have set the ambitions high, and we want to reach those ambitions, of course. I am convinced that our climate policy must go hand in hand with economic growth. Sustainable growth is what we call that. And therefore, we need also sustainable investments. We must make it possible for the inhabitants in Stockholm to continue to raise their standard of living, while we at the same time reduce our climate impact. If these two values are not combined, our climate goals will never be accepted among a broad majority of the people. When doing this, the green bonds is an important tool for financing growth-friendly and sustainable projects. Let me give you all some examples of that. The expansion of our regional commuter train line, Roslagsbanan, is financed with green bonds. It will make it easier to travel from our northern suburbs to the city center without having a negative impact on our climate ambitions. It's good for both jobs and the environment. And people can use less cars. You don't need to have a car in the same numbers as before when we invest heavily in our public transport system in Stockholm region, which is very good as well. The investment is one of our metro lines are financed through green bonds. Also, an important project to improve the mobility and sustainability in our region. Also, construction of new hospital buildings are financed by green bonds. Projects that will ensure that projects that will ensure us to invest in the healthcare sector and to keep a high quality in the healthcare and with sustainable solutions in our buildings. These three projects, the metro line, the Roslagsbanan, and investments in hospitals, are just a few examples of what the green bonds can accomplish. All the projects will help us reducing the region's climate impact in the long term. At the same time, increases the opportunities for economic growth and better healthcare for everyone in Stockholm region. I believe other regions can copy this model. Let us not forget that the young generation demands that we, as politicians, act now to reduce our climate impact. And it's time for us to deliver. We must listen to that generation, but at the same time, keep a cool head. We must be careful with the taxpayers' money and present concrete solutions ahead. Green bonds are one such option. The model combines sustainability and growth in a way that satisfies both a center-right politician like me and my liberal and green coalition partners. And I believe that the inhabitants of the Stockholm region are very satisfied with the solution, finding green solutions, getting better public transport, getting good investments in our hospitals, and actually not at a higher cost for the financing. We have found a real good solution. That's what I think. And this is why I believe that the model can be used successfully in more cities, in more regions, not just in Sweden, but all over the world. Used wisely, the green bonds do not compromise on either our growth or climate ambitions. That makes it an important tool for us in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene, for showing us how you do it and did it in the Stockholm region. This is, I can only be jealous of how our local authorities in Sweden have both the innovation capacity as far as policy, but also as far as financing. And that's really interesting. This is recorded, and hopefully we can show that to finance departments also in local authorities in Israel later and start a discussion on green bonds also here. So thanks so much for the time, Irene.
Thank you very
much. And thanks all the speakers before Irene. Actually, now we finished the English part of our event. And I want to thank everybody that joined us from outside of Israel or the non-Hebrew speakers. And we go for the final part of this event to Hebrew. אז מעכשיו האירוע הוא בעברית ואין תרגום יותר. הדוברת האחרונה שלנו היא ורד קריספין רמתי. ורד היא סגנית מנהל הרשות לאיכות סביבה וקיימות בעיריית תל אביב. וורד תיקח אותנו לדבר על רשויות מקומיות וערים וההתמודדות עם המשבר הבא שכולנו יודעים מהו. היי ורד.
היי אבי, תודה רבה על ההצגה. אני לוקחת רגע להעלות את המצגת. רואים אותה?
כן, רואים.
אז קודם כל אני אשמח, אני אשלח עוד מעט את המייל שלי בסוף, כי כרגע אני במצב תצוגה, כי אני לא אספיק לענות לכם על השאלות בזמן שאני מציגה, ואני הדוברת האחרונה. אז תודה על זה. אז בדקות הקרובות אנחנו נדבר על הזווית המקומית, בתוך הסיפור העולמי. הסינים משתמשים בשתי משיכות מכחול לרשום את המילה משבר. משיכת מכחול אחת משמשת לסכנה, והשנייה להזדמנות. בזמן משבר תהיה מודע לסכנה, אבל תכיר בהזדמנות. השיקום מהקורונה הוא הזדמנות כזו. הזדמנות לחשוב מחדש על החיים שלנו בעיר. הקורונה תקפה עוד יותר את הצורך שלנו להתכונן לשינויי האקלים, שעלולים לחולל משבר גדול יותר. תקופת השיקום עצמה היא תקופה של הזדמנויות, של גורמים רבים להשקיע, להרוויח, להשפיע. זה יכול להיות עידן של צמיחה ירוקה, שלוקחים בו חלק בנקים, חברות ביטוח, קרנות הון, חברות טכנולוגיות, ממשל וגם אזרחים. זה יכולה להיות שעה נפלאה ליצירת משרות חדשות במשק, ממשרות עתירות טכנולוגיה, כמו למשל בתחום אגירת אנרגיה, ועד משרות עתירות ידע הגיוני, כמו גינון אקולוגי. וכל זה יכול לקרות במגוון סקטורים, בנייה, חומרים, אנרגיה, מים, תחבורה, מזון, פסולת. כאן המקום לציין שאני לא כלכלנית, אני בסך הכל עובדת ציבור שלומדת את האתגרים, מחפשת את הדרך להתמודד איתם. אז מה שברור לי בשלב הזה ולעוד רבים אחרים, זה שעד עכשיו שעת הכושר הזאת היא לא מנוצלת דייה, וגם מה שמתקדם קורה בקצב מאוד איטי והרחק מההיקפים הראויים. גורמים ממשלתיים, רגולטורים והסקטור העסקי לא ממהרים לפתוח את הארנק. יש לזה מגוון סיבות שרק חלק מהן אנחנו נזכיר היום. אז אם נחזור לדיון המרתק שהיה לנו פה עם הניחו החזר, הדברים קורים במחוזות רחוקים. ממשלות ברחבי העולם מגבירות את התמיכה שלהם בפרויקטים ירוקים, גם באמצעות רגולציה כמו מיסי פחמן, שמעתי הבוקר את ההצהרה של תמר זנדברג, הצהרה משמחת, וגם באמצעות הוצאות פיסקליות. ביידן למשל שינס מותניים ישר עם הכניסה שלו לתפקיד, הוראה על הערכה רחבה של סיכונים לכלכלה ועל בחינת המימון הדרוש כדי לאפס פליטות גזי חממה. למדינה שלנו ולנו בכלל, אזרחי ישראל, יש את הדרך שלנו עם כמה וכמה כשלים בשלבים השונים של תהליכי קבלת ההחלטות. הצעד הראשון שצריך לעשות הוא לקבל החלטה שאנחנו מכירים באיום של משבר האקלים ועם הצורך להתמודד איתו. אז מדינת ישראל החליטה ב-29 ביולי 2018 החלטה כזו, וביקשה להקים מנהלת בין-משרדית שאכן קמה, והכינה דוח לממשלה על ההתקדמות, ההיערכות והצגת פרויקטים נדרשים לביצוע. דוח ראשון פורסם לאחרונה. הדוח ממליץ בין השאר לעשות הערכה מקרו-כלכלית של השפעות שינויי האקלים והערכת סיכונים ביחס לכלל המגזרים במשק, ולוודא שכל תכנון והשקעה נוספים יביאו בחשבון את ההשפעות של שינויי האקלים ויבוצעו בהתאם. הדוח קובע גם תג מחיר של 2.5 מיליארד שקלים ליישום פרויקטים של טווח קצר, ומציין שהמשך מדיניות של אי עשייה בתחום תגרור איתה השקעות נדרשות גבוהות מאוד בעקבות השפעות שינויי האקלים. כמו שאמרתי, דוח חשוב והתחלה חדשה. יש לנו ממשלה חדשה, עם לפחות 4 שרות חדשות שנחוצות לנו לפעולה. שרת האנרגיה, שרת התחבורה, שרה להגנת הסביבה ושרת הפנים. הרבה תקוות שהשינוי יתחיל בנבחרת הזו של אנשים. כי צריך להסתכל על משבר האקלים בעיניים ולהתחיל לפעול, ונכון לעשות את זה גם בפעילות משרדית. אז מה רשויות מקומיות יכולות לעשות? בעיקר להחליט שהכדור במגרש שלהן ולקחת אחריות. השנים האחרונות הביאו להכרה ששינוי האקלים הם כבר כאן, והערים נדרשות להיערך ולתת מענה כי הן נמצאות בחזית, והן חייבות להיות חלק מהמאמץ העולמי הזה לצמצם פליטות גזי חממה. זה קורה בכל העולם וזה קורה גם בישראל. בינואר 2018 התקבלה עיריית תל אביב-יפו לארגון ה-C40, שחברות בו 96 ערים מובילות בעולם, מחויבות כולן וגם ליעדי ההסכם האקלים של פריז, ואפילו מנהיגות את הקידום לעבר היעדים האלה בערים שלהם ובמדינות שלהם. כחברה בארגון, תל אביב-יפו התחייבה לאמץ יעדי הפחתת פליטות גזי חממה ולפתח תוכנית פעולה לשינוי האקלים. יכולים לראות כאן את המסגרת ואת לוח הזמנים. תוכנית ההיערכות שכתבנו היא הראשונה בישראל. תוכנית מגדירה סל פעולות אופרטיביות שנועדו להבטיח את המשך איכות החיים בעיר לכלל התושבים בסביבה משתנה בגלל שינויי האקלים. תוכנית כוללת מיפוי של שינויי האקלים שצפויים בהשפעתם על העיר, על האוכלוסייה ועל מערך השירותים והסביבה הפיזית. סדרה של אתגרים איתם צריכה העיר להתמודד כדי להבטיח את איכות החיים הנוכחית לכלל התושבים לאורך זמן, וכמובן מגוון כלים ופעילויות. עדיין לא סיימנו, פרק המיטיגציה עדיין לפנינו. פרק ב' בתוכנית האקלים של תל אביב ייכתב על פי עקרונות העסקה הירוקה החדשה, Green New Deal. זאת על מנת להבטיח מרכיבים של חדשנות, הכלה חברתית, כלכלה ובניית תשתית לתעסוקה ירוקה. מה שאתם רואים פה כרגע זה את החווה החקלאית על הגג של דיזינגוף סנטר בימיה הטובים, אוקיי? וכולנו צריכים סביבה שתומכת באפשרות לקיים בעצם תוכניות ויוזמות להיערכות לשינוי אקלים. לצערי, הסביבה שלנו היא עדיין לא סביבה מאפשרת. כל שינוי שרוצים לעשות הוא פשוט מייגע, וקצב ההסתגלות וההתאמה הוא מאוד איטי. כי השינוי שנדרש הוא שינוי מערכתי, שיורד מהמקרו לכל סוגיות המיקרו. ניקח למשל את סביבת החקיקה וההסדרה. כשמדברים על רגולציה בהקשר של משבר האקלים, אז באמת רובנו חושבים על מס פחמן, על חברות, יבואנים ויצואנים, שבעצם מזהמים, בהתאם לזיהום שלהם. זה באמת אחד הכלים המשמעותיים שהאיחוד האירופי בחר לממש את האסטרטגיה שלו באמצעותם, להפוך לאזור ניטרלי מפליטות פחמן עד 2050. ולצד זה יש גם בכל העולם חוקים ותקנים, כמו למשל תקן הבנייה הירוקה שלנו. אבל מה עם דברים לכאורה קטנים שמאפשרים לעסקים וליחידים לקחת חלק בפעולה הזו? אז קניון דיזינגוף סנטר מקדם קיימות עירונית ועושה את זה בדרכים מגוונות ויצירתיות. בין השאר, כמו שאתם רואים בתמונה, באמצעות חקלאות על הגג. אם היו לנו הרבה גגות כאלה בעיר, אז היינו מצמצמים את שריפת הדלקים הנגרמת משינוע תוצרת חקלאית. ואם מדובר בחקלאות שהיא לא הידרופונית, אז היינו גם יכולים באופן הזה להשעות מי גשמים ולהקטין עומסי נגר על התשתיות העירוניות. הבעיה היא שאין הכרה בחקלאות העירונית כענף חקלאי, ויש לזה משמעויות ביחס למחירי מים, ארנונה, הקלות בנייה, ביטוח, הסדרה סטטוטורית, רישוי עסק וקולות קוראים לחקלאים. מנכ"ל עיריית תל אביב פנה בעבר למנכ"ל משרד הפנים, באחת הממשלות הקודמות, ב-2017, בבקשה ליזום תיקון כזה, תיקון חקיקה שיקבע תעריף ארנונה מוזל לחוות לחקלאות אורבנית, הפועלות במבנים שתואם את התעריף הניתן למשתלות שפועלות על הקרקע. אתם גם יכולים לראות את פערי המחיר המטורפים, אם אתם יכולים לראות, אם לא אני יכולה לכתוב לכם בפרטי. וכמובן שהפנייה הזו לא נהנתה ולצערנו המצב לא השתנה. החווה כיום היא בעיקר לימודית בדיוק מהסיבה הזו. בחרתי דוגמה אחת, אבל כמובן שיש דוגמאות רבות כולנו נוכל לעשות יותר אם יהיו לנו יותר אפשרויות בחירה ראויות. סביבה תומכת ומאפשרת היא סביבה שהדיפולט שלה הוא ההתנהגות הרצויה. ואנחנו חיים היום בסביבה הפוכה, שצריך להשקיע בה הרבה מאמץ ואנרגיה כדי להגיע לתוצאה, להתנהגות הרצויה, גם כשממש רוצים. אז עכשיו נדבר על דברים שכן מייצרים סביבה מאפשרת בערים שלנו ויחסית בקלות. קודם כל קרדיט לתרשים הזה למוזיאון העיצוב בחולון, מתערוכה מאוד יפה שהייתה לפני כמה שנים בנושא צל והצללה בעיר. קודם כל פתרונות ראויים בתחילת הדרך הם פתרונות שחוסכים לנו הרבה כאב ראש וכסף בהמשך, כמו בנייה ירוקה, בין אם היא פרטית ובין אם היא ציבורית. בנייה ירוקה זה דבר מאוד פשוט, זה פשוט בנייה איכותית יותר וערוכה יותר, מה שמעניין הוא שתכנון נכון על הנייר לא עולה כסף. אם למשל מתאימים את הבניין לסכמת מסלול השמש המקומי באופן שהוא מנצל את חום השמש בחורף מצד אחד ומצד שני אפשר להצל אותו עם פאנל סולארי בקיץ בגבהים ובזוויות הנכונות, אז יכול להיות וכנראה שיהיה שדיירי אותו בניין לא יצטרכו לבזבז אנרגיה וכסף על מערכת מיזוג יקרה. לפעמים כל מה שצריך כדי לשנות כיוון זה פשוט לשנות תפיסה. תפקידם של פקידים בשירות הציבורי הוא לשנות את התפיסות של המנהלים שלהם. את השקף הקודם וגם את השלושה הבאים לקחתי מחברתי אדריכלית טלי ברגל ממשרד אדריכל העיר, שעושה עבודה חוצת ארגון כדי לוודא שכל מי שצריך להבין שתרומת היער העירוני לאיכות החיים במגוון מדדים מקנה לו מעמד של תשתית לכל דבר ועניין ולא כגורם שהוא nice to have. ולכן צריך להתייחס לעצים מהרגע הראשון של ביסוס התשתיות ברחובות חדשים. אם אנחנו מדברים על רחובות קיימים, אז יש רחובות כמו רחוב קפלן, בטח כולכם ראיתם את הסרטון הנחמד שכאן הפיקו, שהוא נתיב הליכה חשוב ואפשר לשפר אותו בעלות נמוכה יחסית. פשוט אפשר להרחיב את המקום לשורשים ולעשות שימוש בערוגות פתוחות. יש לזה כמובן עלות, אבל היא נמוכה ביחס למחיר של בית גידול. לעומת זאת, יש מקומות שצריך להשקיע הרבה מאוד כסף, תוך הסטת תשתיות מתחרות, אם הדבר בכלל אפשרי. אלה דוגמאות לבתי גידול לעצים שמשתמשים בהם כיום בתל אביב יפו. בתי הגידול האלה יוצרים מרחב מחיה לשורשי העץ בסביבה העירונית ומאפשרים לו להתפתח. לאחר שהעץ יגדל וקוטר העלווה יהיה רחב בגלל שאפשרנו לו כמובן קוטר שורשים רחב, אז יהיה לנו צל. בית גידול כזה עולה כ10,000 שקלים. יותר יקר היום, אבל ישתלם בעתיד. זו דוגמה שנמצאת היום על שולחן העבודה. מדובר בביסוס תשתיות להמשך אבן גבירול ברוב הצפון מערב העיר. זוהי חלופה ראשונה שמייצגת את הכוונה המקורית, להניח את התשתיות ולעשות עבודת אספלט זמנית עד שהשכונה החדשה תתפתח. הצוות המקצועי המליץ אוי, אתם לא כל כך רואים את זה, זה נחתך, אז אני פשוט אסביר. הצוות המקצועי המליץ לבסס את התשתיות של העצים כמו שאר התשתיות. בחלופה שאתם רואים פה, מדובר בעצם על עצים, אבל ללא בתי גידול, אבל כן יש רצועה ברוחב שמאפשרת התפתחות העצים. החלופה הזו יקרה פי 1.5 מהחלופה הראשונה. כן, לא? והחלופה השלישית, שהיא גם עם עצים וגם עם בתי גידול, החלופה הזו יקרה פי 2.5 מהחלופה הראשונה. שתי החלופות, גם חלופה 2 וגם חלופה 3, הן חלופות ראויות לעצים. בשתיהן יש עלות נוספת. אחת מהן בוודאות תיבחר, כי כשאנשי המקצוע מתעקשים, הם מצליחים לשנות תפיסה. מהפרט אל הכלל, העבודה הנרחבת שהראיתי לכם עכשיו בדוגמה, בנושא היער העירוני, היא כרטיסיה אחת בתוכנית ההיערכות לשינוי אקלים, זו שדיברתי עליה בתחילת המצגת. אני רוצה לומר שכתיבת העבודה הזאת היא פעולה משותפת של אנשי מקצוע ליצירת שינוי. יצאנו לדרך באופן עצמאי, בלי הוראה מלמעלה. אספנו עמיתים בעירייה ומחוץ לה, וכתבנו תוכנית שמשכנעת ששווה להשקיע בזה כסף. יש לנו שותפים רבים בתוך העירייה, כפי שאפשר לראות בשקף. השותפים הם שלקחו על עצמם להגדיר את כרטיסיות הפעולה בתוכנית ואת המשימות שבאחריותם. ולכן חלק מהמשימות כבר משולבות בתוכניות העבודה שלהם, וכמובן אושרו על ידי הנהלת העירייה. היישום הוא הדרגתי. הנחת העבודה בבסיס התוכנית הזו ששינויי האקלים ודאיים, אבל העוצמה וההשפעה שלהם לא קבועים ולא ידועים. ולכן התוכנית היא תוספתית והדרגתית. היא תבוצע על פני עשור, כשמדי שנה עשויות להתווסף פעולות לחיזוק ההיערכות. הרמזור הזה מבטא סדרי עדיפויות שנקבעו לטיפול, מה שאומר שלא צריך להוציא את כל הכסף בבת אחת. ההשפעה של שינויי האקלים לא מתוחמת רק לגבולות העיר או לתושביה, ולכן ההיערכות מחייבת רשת של שיתופי פעולה חוצת גבולות וחוצת מגזרים. מהסיבה הזו יש שחקנים רבים ששותפים לתהליך התכנון ולתהליכי היישום. התרשים הזה מציג 4 מעגלי שיתוף, על פי מערכת היחסים של העיר שלנו עם הסביבה והסובבים שלה. בכוורת הזו יש הרבה התרחשויות. מפאת קוצר הזמן אני אזכיר רק 3 מהלכים שהם ממש אקטואליים בימים אלה. קודם כל יש לעירייה מנגנון וולונטרי מעניין שנקרא תו עירוני ירוק לעסקים. זה תו איכות לעסקים שפועלים באחריות סביבתית בסקטורים שונים, כמו בתי אוכל, משרדים, מוסכים ועוד. בימים אלה אנו בונים אסטרטגיה לברית עיר עסקים למען הסביבה, בדגש על הקהילה היזמית והטכנולוגית. העירייה מעמידה בשנים האחרונות תשתית של אקסלרטורים ואבים לטובת המגזר הזה. אנחנו מעוניינים לגלות ולטפח מנהיגות משמעותית במגזר הזה. הדבר השני הוא שלפני שבועיים הושק מיזם האקלים של אוניברסיטת תל אביב. המטרה היא לקדם מחקר יישומי אינטרדיסציפלינרי בשיתוף פעולה עם העירייה. ודבר אחרון, אנחנו כל הזמן מדברים עם ערים וחברות בארץ ובעולם. יש לנו את ערי הסיפורטי ואת הארגון הנהדר הזה שהוא מנוף לחשיבה מחוץ לקופסה ולשיתופי ידע. בארץ יש לנו את החברות הטבעיות בפורום 15 הערים, שאיתן יש לנו ברית משותפת מזה 13 שנים, ואנו לומדות אחת מרעותה ומשתפות פעולה להגנת אקלים. בימים אלה ערי המטרופולין מקדמות יחד מהלך מעניין להבטחת האיתנות המערכת האקולוגית בערים, ביניהן לנוכח שינוי האקלים. אנו מארגנות יחד ועידה אזורית שתבחן כיצד ניתן לייצר שיתופי פעולה לשמירה וטיפוח המערכות האקולוגיות בשכנות טובה במרחב המשותף. הדבר קורה במסגרת מהלך הוועידות האזוריות של חיים וסביבה. תודה. רגע. ובהצלחה לכולנו.
תודה רבה. האמת שיש לנו עוד 5 דקות להמשך דיון ולשאלות. אני רוצה לנצל לפני הדיון את הזמן להגיד תודה לשגרירות שוודיה שארגנה את האירוע הזה, תודה למרחב ולאלה שבעצם עשינו את האירוע הזה ביחד, לשותפים בחיים בסביבה, אשל ופורטר, לאנשים שהיו מאחורי הקלעים, קמיל, חן ואורלי, והאמת שיש לנו עוד 5 דקות, תרגישו חופשי לפתוח מיקרופונים, לשאול או את ורד שעוד איתנו, או שאלות בכלל. ושאלו, ורד, אם אפשר לקבל את המצגת שלך.
כן, בוודאי. אני אעביר לך, בסדר? כי אני לא כך יודעת איך עושים.
מעולה. בסדר.
וזה המייל שלי, דרך אגב, אם יש שאלות מעבר למפגש הזה.
נהדר. אני רואה שאין שאלות, אז תשנו את כולם אחרי 2.25 של דיבורים בשוודית. אז אם כך, תודה רבה לכל המשתתפים.
אבל רגע, אבי, אם יש לי כן הזדמנות לענות על שאלות, אז אני פשוט רואה שיש פה.
יש לך, כן.
כן, מיכל שואלת, לגבי שיתוף תושבים במסגרת השותפות. אוקיי, אז קודם כל, תושבים כמובן שותפים אצלנו בהרבה מסגרות, ואפילו את פרויקט 6 עכשיו אנחנו הסבנו לטובת יותר נושאים של קיימות. בוודאי אנחנו יוצאים ממש בשבועות הקרובים לכתיבת, לכל תהליך, זה לא כתיבה של תוכנית, זה תהליך ארוך של שיתוף בעלי עניין של תוכנית המיטיגציה, וכמובן שתושבים יהיו שותפים לתהליך הזה. באדפטציה, בואו, זה יותר אחריות שלנו לטפל בתשתיות העירוניות. אז אני לא צריכה לשאול לתושב אם אני צריכה להשקיע לו בפרט הזה או בנגר עילי או בסוגיות כאלה, ולכן השיתוף היה יותר מוגבל. ולמי יש מישהו שמעוניין להיות חלק בתהליכים האלה, מוזמן גם לפנות אליי במייל. כן, וגם מאיה, כמובן אני אשמח לפגוש אותך שוב אחרי הרבה שנים ושתף איתך פעולה.
מעולה, אם אפילו ורד כבר לא מזהה שאלות בצ'אט, אז...
אוקיי.
לא, אני צוחקת כנראה שאין יותר שאלות, אבל ורד שיתפה את המייל שלה ואפשר גם להעביר דרכו. אני רוצה להודות לכולם, אני נהניתי מאוד, מקווה שגם אתם, למדנו הרבה, ונתראה באירוע הבא בסדרת האירועים של מרחב.
תודה רבה.
תודה לכולם.